Get it together. What up, what up? Welcome to the Blockument. Crypto education through everyday conversation.
Woo!
My name is Nate Talbot. I did. I'm like a big boy now and stuff.
Yeah, I got big boy pants on.
Yeah.
Sorry, I threw you off.
Yeah. Nate Talbot, Executive Director, Detroit Blockchain Center. And to my right is the superiorly strong
Ashlee Rose. I am an everyday mother. I'm an online reseller, and I'm on a journey to figure out what in the world is going on with all of this Bitcoin, blockchain, crypto stuff I'm hearing about.
All this stuff you're hearing about. All right.
Yeah,
hey, what are you hearing about it?
I'm hearing that it is a revolution against the banks and the elites.
I guess that's one way you could frame it. Sure.
Oh, gosh.
All right.
Help me.
And according to our time chain, not blockchain, time chain, what time is it?
All right. We are at block height number 813,349. The block size is 1.39 megabytes, and that is a total number of transactions of 1,700 and is that 86?
96.
96. Beautiful. And the total subsidies and fees for that one were 6.335 Bitcoin, which equates to 189,726 USD. And the winners of that were, shocker, via BTC. Yes.
I hope our miners are enjoying this grand subsidy, because that will be getting cut in half in around, what's that, probably about 8 months, a little less than 8 months from now.
So then they'll only be getting, what, 3?
6.25, so 3.075, half of 6.25.
Wow.
That'll be getting cut in half. So I'm sort of bullish about all of that, though, not because it typically shows it typically is the beginning of the next cycle, right? That bull market cycle.
You're saying the cutting in half of it?
The halving is typically
where the bull
market starts. Up. Yep. Not instantly, right? But over months, historically speaking. Nothing in the future is guaranteed. But I'm not bullish because of that. I'm bullish because this will be the first time we go into a halving. This year there's been so much new developments built on Bitcoin. For years, while that sort of revolution piece has been the point, right? The price metric, the use case of Bitcoin has primarily been speculation. Now, over the years, like last cycle was the first cycle we started to really, really see usage just as peer-to-peer money. Not here in like the U.S., but abroad you'd have from nation states like El Salvador who have adopted it as legal tender, to you have a lot of nations around Latin America, Africa, primarily those two spots, some places in like Southeast Asia, who are actually using it as a store of value, a flight away from their rapid inflation areas.
Opting out of fiat.
Opting out of the fiat cycle, right? In this cycle, though, this year, in 2023 specifically, or in these past few thousand blocks, there's been so many technologies, from side chains to advances in Lightning Network. We now have this thing called BitVM, which we'd have to do a whole nother show on, which basically allows you to do smart contracts. let me pull that back a little for the hype. It's the first step in fully enabling smart contracts, right, on Bitcoin without needing to change Bitcoin. Right, Ethereum's approach, and this is all what Ethereum's whole thing was. Like, we want to be able to do more than just money,
right?
Which I agree with in theory, right? Money isn't enough. You need to be able to do finance,
right?
Smart contracts is the way to do that, but it's so complicated. It's really risky to put that in your base money. So Ethereum this is how it looks if you put it in the base money. BitVM is sort of how you do this if it's not on the base money as a side chain, as a side function. It's not even a side chain, it's a side function of Bitcoin, which is really exciting. And this could lead to all new types of innovations coming up over these next few years.
That's very interesting. What does VM stand for something, or is it
virtual machine?
Oh, okay.
We get techie, and we'll take this 101 episode up if we start talking about the tech stuff. So we'll get into it. We'll do a whole episode on maybe new developments in Bitcoin or something. But today, what are we talking about?
Today we are talking about how do banks work?
How do banks work?
Yeah.
Like food banks?
Nope. Money. How do money banks work?
Money banks. Papa money banks. Well, you go get you a sugar daddy or a sugar mama and boom.
Yeah,
all right.
If you're out there, call me.
She didn't mean that, B. She didn't mean that. All right, how do banks work? What do you mean?
Well, I guess people say, like, be your own bank, Bitcoin, so then I guess first you'd want to know, like, well, how do banks work? Do I want to be my own bank? Should I want to be my own bank?
That is a really good first question to have that I don't think I've heard very many people reply to when you say be your own bank. Should I be my own? Do I even want that responsibility? Because the answer is probably no.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm assuming then we're talking about banks today.
Yeah. Well, when would we be talking about banks? Tomorrow?
Well, yes, we could talk about banks tomorrow, but that would be how should banks work. We could talk about banks yesterday, which would be how did banks work.
I feel like you have to, well, I guess let's talk about today, and then there might be like questions about how did they work, like how do we get to today, maybe.
All right. I can do that really quick and easy. How do banks work? When you go to a bank, right, and you say, I want money, they basically look you up and down. They might do a little side check thing. And if they want to give you money, they go to their spreadsheet and they say, Ashlee Rose now has $50,000. Done. And that's how banks work. Thank you for coming to our TED Talk.
No,
see you next week. Come for the riches. Stay for what?
No, there's more to it. There has to be. They don't. You mean like you're saying? You're alleging that the bank. Okay, you walk into a bank and you're like, I want $50,000. I'm gonna go buy a new car, and then they're like, oh, do, type it in, and that's what you get.
See, she understands. I'm not alleging. That's exactly how it works.
But then,
so thank you for coming to our TED Talk.
How's that
Come
possible?
for the riches, stay for the what?
So you're I don't understand. Like, I don't get it. So you're saying like they can just make up their own money and like just like, why can't I do that?
Well, because I don't know you. I don't trust you.
Well,
but you could theoretically do that.
Oh, you mean like what, counterfeiting?
No. No. If you wanted to be a bank, you be a bank and then you do the same thing.
Like go get a license? Like, I feel like you're not giving me details here.
You tell me, how do you think banks work?
I think that you go, like I think it's a place for people to store their money. I think that you go to a bank, you give them your money, say, hey, can you hold on to this for me? We're living in a digital world. I don't want to hold on to and carry, all of my millions of dollars. And so I'd like for you to hold on to it for me. And you can give me this handy dandy little debit card, and I can just swipe it whenever I need to use my money, and you'll just hold on to it for me because you're so kind.
What? This is not a theoretical question, and this is not like a deep probe. I'm not trying to be philosophical on you. Mm-hmm. When you say they hold your money, what are you talking about? What is money? Not philosophically. I'm not looking for a history.
Dollars.
What is money? All right. You want them to hold your dollars.
Yeah.
So before we started this episode today, our producer asked you if you had some dollars.
Right. Change.
Some extra change. So,
excuse me.
Out of all the dollars that you have at your fingertips, how many of those, what percentage of those did you actually have on you today?
I don't know,
rough estimate. We're not going to do math and check it.
2%?
2%?
Yeah.
All right. I have 0%. I don't hold dollars at all, right? And most people are someplace between me and you, right? Out of all the dollars, let's put it like this. If you use U.S. dollars as our base when we talk about money for the context of this conversation, if we use U.S. dollars, U.S. money, right, as context, someplace in the neighborhood of 98 to 99% of all the dollars in existence aren't physical.
Oh, they're just numbers on a screen. Is that what you're trying to get at?
They're just numbers on a screen. Dollars don't exist.
Excuse me.
Which is why I asked you in the beginning, are you talking about how banks did work, how banks should work, or how banks do work? And if it's how banks do work, what you said in the beginning, you literally walk in, it's numbers in a spreadsheet that the bank updates, right?
So they're a business that doesn't have to be held to any sort of standards of when it comes to revenue or they are a business, aren't they?
They are a business. So let's stop beating around. Let me stop beating around the bush.
Yeah, please.
Okay.
I'm trying to ask the right question, but I'm dang, I don't.
It really is as simple as what you said, and by the end of this conversation, hopefully you'll see that. Okay. So, yes, banks still do serve a function of holding dollars, physical dollars for you, right? But I think a better way of thinking about that today is not that you go to a bank and you put $100 into it, right? And they're holding $100 bills for you. That's not really what happens. That's how banks used to work.
Right. Because, you're right. Because now I get a direct deposit. So they're
even if you walked in with a $100 bill.
Yeah.
Right? Really what you're doing is no bank, almost no bank. I don't know of a bank, so maybe no banks. Almost no banks store dollars for you. What they do is they take your physical dollars when you deposit them into your savings account or a checking account or whatever. When you deposit physical dollars into the account, all they're doing is basically evaporating that physical dollar,
right,
and turning it into a digital dollar, right? A digital version, an electronic dollar, to be clear in terminology. It's not really a digital dollar, it's an electronic version of your dollar, right?
Okay.
Via a spreadsheet.
Okay.
Now, as far as the bank, you see yourself coming in with physical dollars and depositing them.
Right.
That's not what the bank sees. On their end, they have this double ledger accounting book, right? And they say, all right, Alice walked in and asked for $100. We like information we have about Alice. We'll create out of thin air $100. It's only on this spreadsheet, right? I've put this in here. Now, Alice can choose to utilize that $100 however she wants to. So maybe she chooses to go to an ATM or go to the bank and withdraw a physical $100 bill asset, okay? She ends up taking that $100 bill asset and giving it to you for something, right? And then you come to the bank and then you deposit that $100 bill because you want to have access to it later.
Right.
All the bank sees is we created a $100 bill. Ashlee deposited a $100 bill. So we'll convert that back to digital. We had $100. Now we got $100. We're back at 0. They created money. They've accounted for the money. Boom. It's a spreadsheet.
Okay, but what I'm not understanding is, like, do they have, like, a budget where they're like, okay, we're starting with, like, $100 million.
No, you're already
and we
wrong.
have to
Nope.
balance the
That's
books.
how banks did work. Nope. You're already taking it from the wrong approach. There is no initial balance.
So they have an infinite, like, on their budget, it's just like an infinity sign. They just
Yep.
put whatever they want.
Money is not a fixed supply thing. What you're confusing this with is commodity money, which is what the world used to use, but hasn't technically used, right? Since the 70s. So for 50 years, it hasn't worked like that.
Meaning when we got off of the gold standard.
That's when we got off the gold standard,
Okay.
which is a commodity money base.
Right.
Technically speaking,
Yeah.
we went to a pure fiat standard, right?
Yeah.
Prior to that, while technically we were on commodity money, governments and banks have been weaning us off of commodity money for a few hundred years, several hundred years before that. So we haven't really had that, what most people think of when they think of how bank deposits and withdrawals and loans, all that works. That hasn't really been the case for hundreds of years, right? It's just our education systems suck and they don't really teach us that, probably because if you knew how money worked, you'd freak the fuck out.
Yeah.
Right? But like we call this, especially if you're in the Bitcoin world or the crypto world, you'll call this fiat money. What does fiat mean? Like, what's the literal definition
Like
of
government,
fiat?
like owned?
No,
Government,
it's
produced?
derived from, I think, Latin, which just means by decree. I said it. So
Because I
fiat
say
money
so.
means money because I've said so.
Oh, okay.
When you ask what backs the dollar, right? Most people, gold. I still think today most people would still think gold. It's not. It hasn't been since the 70s by the most technical standards. And theoretically, it hasn't been since 100 years or so been backed by gold. It's by decree. What backs the U.S. dollar? The goodwill and faith of the U.S. government. The U.S. has such a great reputation, heavy quotes around great and reputation and all this, but the U.S. has such a great reputation that if it says there's this money, everybody's just like, well, they're not going to screw us over. If they say that's what it is, it's what it is. That's theoretically how that works.
Oh, boy.
And by decree, the government, so like there's the meme, especially through the whole lockdown era of the 2020s, right? There was this meme that went around like the Federal Reserve, right? The government, however you want it, two separate things, technically speaking, but the money printer goes burr. The Fed prints money.
Yeah.
Fed doesn't print money. The Fed buys debt.
I'm writing that down.
Right? So we're going to get into a little bit of deep thing, maybe take out some paper and pen or take a couple notes because it can get tricky. I should have built like a little graph thing or whatever, asked ChatGPT to do that for me or something. But all right. So in the U.S., how it works is, and this is on a federal level, right? People think, all right, well, if we want to increase Social Security, right, we have to do something with taxes. Or if you want to do welfare, whether it's corporate welfare or personal welfare, any kind of what do you call it, subsidy type program, you'll have to raise taxes to produce revenue to redistribute. That is not how government works, especially on a federal level. Your taxes do not pay for NASA. Your taxes do not pay for government subsidies. Your taxes do not pay for war. Your taxes don't pay for any of that. That hasn't been true in such a long time.
All right, you just blew my mind.
Right? Your taxes don't pay for anything. When the government... On a federal level.
Okay.
On a local level.
Federal,
right? If you pay like state
level.
taxes because they're like, we got to fix the roads.
Right.
They have to, but a state, Like we're in Michigan. Michigan can't print its own money.
Right.
Right?
I see where you're going.
The federal government can print its own money.
Right. So then why do they tax us?
We'll get to that.
Okay. I need to know now.
So how it works is the Treasury Department, which is the government, will say, well, Congress will say something like, we want to be in 5 wars right now because we love war. Okay?
Sounds familiar.
But we have to pay for troops. We have to pay for equipment. We have to pay for transportation. We got to pay for all this stuff. And we need money. So the Treasury Department will do something like, all right, well, let's make some money. And so they'll issue treasuries and bonds, treasury bonds, right?
Okay.
This is basically saying like, hey, if you give us some money, you citizens, you other countries, you corporations, anybody, if you give us money, we're going to give you this treasury bond, this bond, which is a promise to pay back all the money you've given us with this interest rate, right? So you'll get a little bit of
assuming they win the war.
Always assuming they win the war.
Yeah.
But it's the U.S.
Yeah. They never lose.
All heavy quotes. If you're listening, there's a lot of sarcasm in my face and a lot of heavy quotes. But, yeah, assuming you win the war, we're going to pay this back. So these are like war bonds. You've probably heard, especially during the world wars, these became popular.
So what it really is fundraising.
It's fundraising. But what do you do when nobody wants to buy your bond? You haven't raised any funds.
Right.
This is where the Federal Reserve steps in. What the Federal Reserve will do is they'll be the buyer of last resort, right? So you're the Treasury Department. You issue all these bonds. People can buy them, maybe you know, for your college, whatever, for the kids or whatever. But nobody buys enough to pay for fund for the war. The Federal Reserve, which is not a government agency, right? These are private banks, come in and they say, well, look, we'll buy all the bonds from you, right?
Yeah.
But that's debt. So the U.S. now is
in debt to the
Federal Reserve, right? Okay. And so the Federal Reserve is buying the treasuries and whatnot and buying whatever. And so the government gets their money and they go do their war, right?
Right.
But now they've issued so much debt, you get these things like inflation and things like that start to get out of hand.
Right.
And so they'll charge you taxes to sort of pull the money back in, and they can sort of destroy it and do whatever they want to, so the money supply can be in a realm where they feel they can control it, right? The government, they being the government.
So what you're saying is that the federal taxes are meant to reduce inflation.
They're meant to control money supply. So they print the money through debt, but and that will be sort of how you get good times and the economic stimulus, all this stuff. That's how you get that flowing. You print the money. But once that gets out there and the money gets excessive, like it did under the lockdown regimen, right? There's too much money flowing. This is inflation. So we need to pull it back. You can do a couple different things. You can raise taxes, which pulls that in, or you could call on the Federal Reserve to do something, and they'll usually do that through raising interest rates. They'll make money more expensive to do things like borrowing,
so the Federal Reserve has a lot of power for just being a standard bank. For
being the buyer of last resort. But think of them like that.
Couldn't any bank be a buyer of last resort?
Well, the Chase Federal Reserve. Well, here's the thing.
Okay.
Because we're about to get to that. So we're talking about the right. So you got the Federal Reserve, the big bank, right? You can't ever go to the Federal Reserve and get money.
And try to open up an account.
And open up an account and all that yet.
Yeah.
They're working on that.
Right.
We don't want that.
Yeah, that's the Fed
but they're
ID,
working on
right?
That's Fed now, but this is what CBDCs become. But we'll get to that.
A lot of
Take
stuff
a note.
is starting to make sense right now.
Right. So the Federal Reserve is the bank that commercial banks use. You go to a Chase, you go to a Bank of America, a Wells Fargo, you go to a retail bank or a commercial bank, right?
Okay.
They go to the Federal Reserve.
Okay.
right?
Right.
And so when you hear them say, right, we're printing money, the Federal Reserve and the Treasury don't print money. The Treasury prints debt.
Okay.
Right? They build out these IOUs, like here's a receipt, buy it from me. The Federal Reserve guarantees that all those treasuries will get bought if corporations, consumers, other countries don't buy them or buy enough. Banks, the commercial banks, the retail banks, the Chase, the JP Morgans, Bank of Americas, they print the money. And that's because we don't use commodity money anymore. When people think of banks, they think of like, oh, you're holding, I give you my savings and you loan it out to somebody else.
Right.
That hasn't been true for a very long time.
Because they don't need to, because they can just print it.
They don't need to. They'll just, when you go to a bank, they'll just update their ledger. They'll print it. When you say, I want to start a business, I need $150,000.
This is frustrating.
They say
to hear.
here, because the concept is, the theory is, I can print this $150,000. You disperse it however you want to.
Yeah.
Eventually, that $150,000 is going to come back to my bank, or it's going to come back to the banking system.
Right.
So in the best case scenario, let's take Bank of America for an example. I go to Bank of America and say I need $150,000 to start a business.
Yeah.
They agree to print it for me. And they don't print it.
Yeah.
They literally just
type it in.
Type it in.
Yep.
Right? And now it's updated because I'm probably not paying cash for all this stuff.
Okay.
Then I go to you, who's going to build up my factory or build up whatever I'm in or help supply.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, I need $50,000.
Yeah.
I'm probably just going to transfer it to you using a credit card, a debit card, a wire transfer.
Right.
And that's just the bank saying, okay.
Something still digital.
We created $150,000 for Nate.
Yep.
We're going to take $50,000 and send it to Ashlee's account.
Yep.
On the bank's ledger, it's still $150,000.
Right, because
Now, for this, they're charging me interest, right? I'm paying interest on this.
for your
$150,000
loan.
for my loan,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So when I pay back the principal, that $150,000, the bank doesn't take that $150,000 because it's not physical dollars anymore, right? They're basically just redestroying the money. They've generated $150,000 they've given to me. The principal, that $150,000 I pay back, as they get it back, they just basically destroy it. So their balance sheet stays at zero as far as the principal loan. But the interest that they're making, well, that's money coming from other money they've printed or whatever that turns into sort of this real money that they can put on their balance sheet as profit. Right? So they charge me 10% interest. They're going to get $15,000 back on their balance sheet. All imaginary money. It's really critical. Everybody understands money is made up. Even commodity money is imaginary. Gold is imaginary. It's just a rock. We tie all the value to it.
So then why is counterfeiting illegal? If it's
because it messes up the balance sheets and it messes up the economy. Because then you don't have an accurate representation. There should only be X amount of dollars. There's more of it. You don't really know where it's whatever.
What if you just counterfeit it and you send the bank a note and say, hey, I made this much money, put that on your balance sheet?
Write your congressman.
Unbelievable.
That's sort of how it worked. The reason we're in this banking, in the system we're in now, one of the reasons is throughout like the 19th century, so like the 1800s and prior to that, maybe even into the 1900s, the 20th century. I don't know exact cutoff date. But banks did used to basically do that. So you would go to Chase and say you want money. They would literally just give you that receipt, even though it was a commodity-based money, and that's why I say commodity-based money isn't even how it used to work. They would fractionally reserve the hell out of it as they wanted to, and you would have this Chase dollar.
Yeah, which is that.
But I might have a Bank of America dollar.
Right.
But those $1 aren't equal to each other because Bank of America might only fractionally reserve 50% of their money, while Chase fractionally reserves 80% of their money.
Right, but both of those dollars are the receipt for
the commodity that's supposed to be backing them. But nobody goes and cash. People haven't in hundreds of years cashed in those things. They just pass around the receipt.
So it's like,
this is how banks used to work, right? They don't work like that anymore because that isn't a receipt anymore. That
like overselling an overselling of a flight, basically.
That's how money used to
sell
work.
all the tickets, but then when someone shows up to get on the flight, oops, sorry, not enough flight.
Right. That's how money used to work. That isn't how it works now, but most people still think that's how it works.
I fully thought that was how it worked.
Right. And so, like, in sort of Bitcoiner terms or hard money enthusiast terms, right? We're used to hearing the arguments against like Austrian economics and Keynesian economics, right? Austrian is a hard belief, as a very high level overview. Austrian is like this hard belief in hard money, right? Commodity money, gold type money.
Okay.
Keynesian economics is more like, well, we're not going to concern ourselves so much. It might still be gold-backed money. It might still be commodity money, but money by nature has these ebbs and flows, and we should really, really fight hard to kill those ebbs. Like, we want to avoid downturns.
Okay.
Even if that means sacrificing long-term, like making it even more and more risky. We don't want people to ever suffer. Austrians are more like, we don't want people to suffer, but it's better in little spurts, right? It's better to fall and bump your knee, fix that, learn from it, and move on than it is to fall and break your whole leg and hip, right? Keynesian's like, we just don't want people to fall.
So
But
Keynesian,
now...
So Keynesian is like building the bubble.
Keynesian is starting to build the bubble. This is what modern economics up to around 2001 to 2008. This is how, from like definitely the 70s, really the early 1900s, all the way through to about 2000, early 2000s. This is how global economies worked off of Keynesian economics.
Keynesian's like meme would be like, everything's fine with like the dumpster fire behind them. Everything's
No,
fine.
I wouldn't say that about Keynesians. I would say they're more like, yeah, everything's sort of on fire, but don't worry, we have water hoses. Let's just use those.
Okay.
Austrians are more like, let's not play with fire. Now we have this whole other school, which is called modern monetary theorists.
Okay.
They are like, fire doesn't exist, man. Just chill out. It's all in your mind, man.
Yeah.
You don't need the water hose. There's no fire.
Oh no, that's modern.
That's what we do now, right?
Okay.
And it's the basis of it's not that they're entirely wrong, right? Money is made up.
Right.
It's a human construct. Gold has no value beyond what we as a society give it, right? This is why when Europeans came to the Americas, the Native Americans here were flush in gold. So if you were a Spaniard and came over, like, I'll give you gold for that thing, they're like, do you see this building? It's built out of that. You want to give me fucking cement?
Yeah.
But that thing you're riding, what you call that?
Yeah.
This horse? Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So money is what you make it. It's made up.
Right.
And if money is made up, the concept of inflation and deflation and supply and demand, all of those things are also made up.
Right.
Because they're based off of the money issue. But that being said, even though it's made up, there's rules that apply, like inflation and deflation. If you're going to play, it's like playing Dungeons and Dragons or Monopoly. Have you ever played Monopoly?
Yeah.
All right. What do you use free parking? What's the purpose of the free parking square in Monopoly?
Uh-oh, I don't play like that much.
Well, just like if you've ever played it, what was it used for?
To like, to do what?
Collect the money.
To collect the money. Our producer says collect the money. What did you, when you played it, what is it for?
Everybody, I was just going to say,
So you're a regular citizen, you have no idea what it's for.
Yeah, I don't know.
And if you read the rule books, it's for nothing. Nothing happens with free parking. It's literally meant for, according to the rules, when you land on it, you don't got to worry about paying rent. You don't get to buy nothing. It's free parking. You just get to chill for a round.
yeah, I was going to say it's just like to catch a break for a second.
Right. But Monopoly is a made-up game. So you get to make up rules.
Yeah.
And so I've always played it like, all right, when you have to pay taxes in Monopoly and when you go to jail and pay the $50 to get out of jail in Monopoly and all these other little fines and stuff, where does that money go? The rules say it goes back to the bank on paper. But who cares about that's Monopoly's rules? That's who makes Monopoly? Not Warner Brothers, but close enough. That's their rules. This is my house rules.
Yeah.
House rules is when you pay to get out of jail, that money goes under free parking. When you pay your taxes, that money goes under free parking. And whoever lands on the free parking
gets it.
That just turned into a lottery.
Yeah.
We just made those rules up.
Yeah. I think
because you can do that.
Yeah.
Why can't you do that with regular money? You can, because it's all just made up.
Yeah.
Just the players have to agree by the rules. Right?
Yeah.
And so modern monetary theorists are like, these are just rules that we made up. You're the U.S. government. Yeah. Why do you need commodity-backed money? You've already given that up.
Yeah.
Right? It's now fiat. It's by decree.
Yeah.
If it's by decree, why do you need to worry about your debt? Debt is irrelevant. If anybody tries to call you on your debt, you just print the money and pay off the debt. You can't do that. Ashlee Rose can't do that because you don't have a money printer in your basement. You don't get to update your spreadsheet that we know of. Right? But the U.S. government, Michigan, where we are, can't do that. They don't just get to go. You can't go to Lansing and they just print up Michigan dollars, right? Because they have to play by the rules of the federal government.
Right.
So they need to collect taxes. City of Detroit, right? They need to collect taxes
to get some sort of revenue.
In order for any revenue flow to happen. Okay. And again, this isn't a debate on whether taxes, you should pay taxes, you should want to pay taxes, taxes, save, whatever, however you feel about taxes, great. But if you want a functioning local municipality, it needs to get funded somehow, right? The federal level hasn't played that game in years, 50 to 100 years.
Because they don't need to.
Because they don't need to, especially if you're the U.S. government, because you are not only printing up the money for the country, the rest of the world now sort of depends on your money. So you hear a lot of people talk about like, well, the U.S. government screwed because BRICS, right? The BRICS system, and people can start paying for BRICS. Why haven't you heard the U.S. really panic about BRICS system? There's two reasons.
Why? Because we have maybe bigger guns.
We have bigger guns.
And some the countries or those other places maybe owe us debt or something, or I don't know.
BRICS.
Phone a friend.
BRICS stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, right? Those are the countries that sort of make that up. All of them, once you dig into their books, they all still depend on the U.S. dollar. They're not totally broken away from you'll have heard before. If you don't understand money and banks and how they work, well, the U.S. is screwed because China owns so much U.S. debt, right? And that was if you don't understand money, you're like, well, China can just call in that debt and then the U.S. is screwed.
Well,
not because the U.S. can just, the U.S. can just print the money. I don't care how much we owe China.
Right.
How much do we owe them? We owe them $3 trillion. Hey, go print $3 trillion. Here you go.
Yeah.
Because we'll fix the inflation part later.
Yeah, but that would be us paying taxes back. That'd be on the burden of the people.
It would be on the burden of the people to pay it back, or they could do interest rate. There's a lot of games with modern monetary because you can change the rules. Free parking doesn't work like this anymore. Hey, let's change the rules.
Yeah.
Right? And so if BRICS is mostly backed by China and China's economy is backed by U.S. debt, then BRICS is just a derivative of U.S. dollar still. They don't care. Go use the BRICS system. We still get paid at the end of the day.
Now, okay, two questions here. Number one, they're two separate questions. Who makes the rules? Who gets to decide the rules? Okay, and then I thought I heard something about Russia was stockpiling gold, so then they could start using their, I believe it's rubles, and they could get off of the U.S. dollar. But even still, All
right. So first question, who makes the rules? This is why we Bitcoin, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't Bitcoin, maybe you Ethereum or maybe you Avalanche. But this is why we do any of this, right?
Crypto. This is why we crypto.
Because the rules are plainly written in advance. We can all see them. We run our own nodes, right? Or our own validator, you do whatever. And you see the rules, and the rules can't be changed. We, as a collective, decide the rules. And if we decide we want to change the rules, we change the rules, right?
We being the people who are playing.
Who are running the nodes. So in a Bitcoin situation, those who run nodes, those who do mining, those who, do the programming.
Are active in the network.
They're active in the network. They make the rules, and all of us sort of have to agree. All of the parties involved have to sort of agree to change the rules. The miners can't just change the rules, right? If they do, none of the nodes, none of the developers, none of the businesses will accept those rules. And then the miners, those blocks get rejected. So how we start each show, right? You're reading off, this pool won the block, but if they try to change the rules, well, nobody else participates in that. So your block subsidy just went to nothing.
Yeah.
Because nobody's ever going to respect any of those transactions, no Bitcoin, none of that. So we get to change the rules.
Block.
It's a full block. It's an invalid block. Nobody, unless you accept that miner's rules. Okay. So this is like where you have Bitcoin, then you have like Bitcoin Cash. Bitcoin Cash said, we want to change the rules. Those who like to play by Bitcoin Cash's rules went to Bitcoin Cash. Those who didn't want Bitcoin Cash's rules stayed on Bitcoin proper.
Okay.
The market then priced both of those assets. They both work. If you use Bitcoin Cash, you use Bitcoin Cash.
Yeah.
But the market doesn't value that just as much as they value Bitcoin. Just like Chase gets to print money. You could print money. You could go get a banking license and stuff. And then you could print money. But the question is, does anybody value your money? The market will decide if they value Ashlee's
You're saying
printing.
if I print something other than the USD from my bank.
Yeah. And that's why you get the regulations. Let's say you bypass all the regulations. You just want to start your own bank. You find a way to do that without having to get banking licenses and all that. The question is, do they value it? This is why so many countries depend on the U.S. dollar at the end of the day. Russia, which goes into your second question, the ruble, and Russia's never wanted to play this U.S. game on record. They're like the first nation of record to not want to get on the fiat standard, not want to go by a gold-backed U.S. dollar stable currency or reserve currency. Russia's always been anti that. I personally think that's why there's always been this sort of contention between Russia and the U.S. But they've never wanted to play it. But they're in a global society. To meme it, you live in a society, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, cool, you're going to stockpile gold and then back your ruble off of gold. But what makes gold valuable?
Well, I initially think two things. I think because there's a limited amount and it's produced by the earth. And then the other thing is we said so.
We said so. Society said so.
Yeah.
Society has now said, look, in global catastrophe, when everything else is at question, we value gold. And so there's conflict in the Middle East right now.
Yep.
When that started, gold price went up, right? Because it's a sort of a flight to safety. When that gets resolved, whatever that resolution looks like, right? Assuming it doesn't lead to World War III, gold price will plummet.
Right.
Because that's what gold does.
Yeah.
So people don't respect gold the same way they did 300 years ago. Gold is a sort of flight to safety. But in good times, or at least moderately good times, gold becomes just this other thing for gold bugs, right? Who think it's always bad times. And I tend to agree. I agree more with them than the others. But right? And so they'll use gold as that base. So that's where gold's base price comes from. So it probably won't crash below, $1,200 or $1,500, give or take a few $100s. It won't crash below that because the support. So when Russia says, I want to take my rubles, we're going to make it its own thing, cool. But people got to trust Russia. People got to care enough about gold, and they got to trust Russia. And it's not a Russia unique problem. It's the same reason why any country you name that's not the U.S. Can't print its own money. Because it's not a thing. They could, technically. Venezuela did that.
Respected or something?
Well, yeah. Who's going to respect? This is why the BRICS argument. Let's say no country in BRICS has any connection with U.S. dollar systems,
And
U.S.
they create, like, a
monetary
BRICS
system.
dollar.
They really have their really unique adjacent BRICS system. Money is really just how you store your purchasing power for future usage, right? Do you trust your purchasing power to Brazil?
I don't really know enough about them. If they had a dollar, I'd be like, probably that's okay.
Right, but now look at their economy.
Yeah, I don't know.
Would you trust it to Russia? Do you trust China with your purchasing power?
No.
India?
No.
South Africa? You don't even trust these players. You have to trust these players. Some maybe you trust more than the others, but
Yeah.
when you're talking about your purchasing power,
Right. Like, I don't
you
even
have
trust
to
my
store
neighbor.
it someplace. You don't even trust your neighbor, right?
They're just next door.
Right. So for whatever reason that you trust, so most people trust the U.S. Not that they trust the U.S.
Yeah.
Again, if you're just listening and not seeing, there's heavy quotes around a lot of this stuff. But it's like, all right,
It's
the
worked
U.S.
in the
has
past.
bigger bullets.
Yeah.
So if it came down to it,
Yeah.
the U.S. could force you to use their currency or force or enforce somebody who is trying to skirt their currency.
Yeah.
I don't think Venezuela could enforce any currency controls they lay down outside of their own border. So outside of their border, their money is worthless. But that also makes it worthless inside of their border, which is why what's the number one used cryptocurrency on the planet?
Oh, I know this. We talked about it before. It's on Tron, right?
It is on Tron.
Tether?
Tether. What is Tether?
Stable coin.
Just a stable coin. Stable to what? Stable compared to what?
I'm not sure. I don't know. It's
Compared to the
stable-
U.S. dollar.
Okay. Yep.
It's stable to the U.S. dollar. One tether is supposed to stay pegged to one U.S. dollar.
Yeah.
And when you're measuring dollars to dollars, well, the price doesn't fluctuate. $1 is $1.
Yeah.
Right? People want dollars. Whatever reason is, you can feel however you want to. People want dollars now because the U.S. is the U.S. That can change over the next 20 years, 50 years. Some people say it's changing right now. You know what I mean? But today, most people...
At this block height.
And money is just, at this block height, money is imaginary. And in most people's imagination, the U.S. dollar is the safest
Top
bet
dog.
for that.
The top G.
It's the top dog. As far as like your day to day.
Yeah.
But wealthy people, wealthy nations, people that can afford savings, nobody saves in dollars.
Yeah. So then it's really not the top dog.
Well, it is the top dog when it comes to transactions and payments.
Okay.
It's not the top dog when it comes to a store of value.
What is the top dog?
Well, right now, today, at this block height, Bitcoin.
Yeah. I thought you went
Historically,
for that layup.
gold, real estate, stock markets.
Yeah.
I mean, there's alternate things. The number one top dog has been Bitcoin.
How much time do we have left? I got a question I got to ask.
We got a couple minutes.
Cool.
We got a while.
Okay, so then now where does it become like a be your own bank in Bitcoin?
Wait, say it one more time.
Where does be your own bank in Bitcoin
Be
come
your
from?
own bank. Gotcha. So,
Yep.
it's a cruddy saying. It's really like, the saying is, for be your own bank. So we know how banks work. They print their own money. They control their own thing. They make their own rules, right? But another question you asked is who gets to make those rules, right? And I explained how, like in Bitcoin or any other system, right, where it's decentralized,
right?
We make that. In U.S. economics, Western economics, the euro, the dollar, the British pound, all of these countries, it's a mixture of typically unelected officials. So it's not even if you're in a representative government type, a republic, a democracy, or whatever. It's not even the person you voted for making the rules. In the U.S., the head of the Treasury who issues debt, right? They're appointed by the president,
right?
Who you don't even vote for, really, directly, right? You got that whole electoral college thing,
right.
So you have the president, who you don't directly really vote for, depends on what state you live in and how much control you have over that. Then they appoint a Treasury Secretary, right, who basically decides how much debt the U.S. can issue. Then they call upon the Federal Reserve, who's mostly private banks, right?
Okay.
You have some government appointees who head the Federal Reserve, but the Federal Reserve is private banks who guarantee that debt that the Treasury Department has sort of issued, and they act as the buyer of last resort. Also, they act as a lender of last resort to the commercial banks, retail banks that we interact with, right, who also aren't elected in all this. And so literally, who decides to print money? The person, when you go to ask for a loan, the person sitting across from you who's like, yay or nay, they decide. That person decides what the rules are. You get money, you don't get money. And then they work on a very loose set of rules that the Federal Reserve will guarantee. So if they mess up, the Federal Reserve will guarantee it. So you heard about those bank collapses that happened a few thousand blocks ago, right? All the banks that were collapsing, like SVB.
Yeah.
So they played by the rules, but they made some wrong bets. And it's really because the Treasury screwed them over. It gets complicated on that. But they didn't collapse. So like SVB, Silicon Valley Bank. Yeah, SVB. They didn't collapse because a bank run happened because of commodity money, the way people think about it. It wasn't that SVB took Alice's deposit and loaned it out to you, and then Alice came asking for her money back. That's not what happened.
It wasn't like, you're saying it wasn't a run on the bank, is that
It wasn't a run on a bank.
Okay.
But it's not because SVB took Alice's deposits and then gave them to Ashlee Rose, and then Alice came and asked for her money back, and they didn't have the money.
Saying, okay.
It happened because Alice came and deposited all this money in the bank. Well, the bank gets to print money, so loans didn't matter. Banks are in the business of making money.
Right.
They took that money that Alice deposited and they put it into treasuries.
They made it back.
They bought treasuries that the Treasury Department issued. They bought U.S. debt with a promise, like let's say they did a 6 month, a 1 year, a 10 year, 3 year. You can do all these different.
Yeah.
So maybe they did a 1 year bet, basically, because it's a safe bet. The U.S. government, fiat, by decree,
never
I'll
fails.
buy U.S. debt with this money. Alice probably won't come back and ask for all her money at once.
Right.
So I'll buy this debt. In a year, I'll get that money back plus interest. So I've made some money off of Alice's money.
Right.
I'll give her 0.5% of that, or 4% if you're doing like actual savings. Right? I'll give Alice a small cut of that. But what happened is Alice came to ask for that money back, but the Treasury Department and Fed done messed up because they raised the interest rates.
Right.
So on paper, right, if Alice deposited $100,000,
Okay.
the SVB took $100,000 and bought U.S. Treasury with a promise of, let's say, 2% return.
Okay.
Right? But then the lockdowns, the world happened. The Federal Reserve raised the interest rates.
Okay.
Which causes the interest rate of the Treasury to actually go down. So now it might be paying like 0.2% yield or 1%. They don't have the money.
Right.
If Alice comes demanding that money back, if the only way the bank can get it is they have to go liquidate. They have to figure out somebody else to buy the Treasury the Treasury bond from them for $100,000 at least, so they can give it to Alice.
But nobody's
buying it because the rate is going down, which means they have to sell it at a loss. They might only be able to sell it for $90,000.
The government doesn't buy it back?
Yeah, only when it comes to maturity.
Oh, only in
if you have a 10-year Treasury, the government's off the hook for 10 years.
I see.
You're betting that this government will still be around in 10 years. Right? And the government's not going anywhere, but they're not paying the same interest rate right now because they got 10 years to
So there's
meet
no
their
motivation
obligation.
for someone else
So yeah, if you come along, why would you buy $100,000 treasury
to make like
that was bought premised at 3%, but the current rates are only 0.5%.
Right.
And we've seen in Europe over this huge recession that nobody admits we have going on right now. We've seen in Europe it hit negative interest rates.
Jeez, Louise.
That means the bank is paying the U.S. government to lend the the European government at that time. Yeah. They're paying the U.S. governments to loan them money.
So that percent that you buy the treasury at is not actually guaranteed.
It is guaranteed, but what's the first thing you said? Assuming the country's still going to be around, assuming you win the war.
Yeah.
So it's guaranteed to the extent that the guarantor
and it's only
is creditworthy enough.
And it's only guaranteed on that year from now date.
On the date of maturity.
Date of maturity. Okay.
Which got really complicated probably really quick, but that's generally how it works, right? It's money made up. Mm-hmm. People make up the rules at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And usually it's people who other people didn't even ask to make up the rules. And you have no predictability on how that works. And this is why people flee to a system like Bitcoin, because the rules are predetermined and no small subset of individuals can change those rules.
So, okay, so you're saying the banks make their own rules. So in the sense of saying be your own bank, you get to have a say in what the rules are, thus you becoming your own bank.
Right.
It's not, because when I think of that, I think of like, I'm holding on to my own money, I can give myself a loan, I can pay myself back, I can do my own finance.
You probably could. At the end of the day, if you really your own bank, that phrase only applies to people who run their own node. If you're not running a node, if you just got a wallet, right? You're using whatever wallet. I won't even name any. If you're using any wallet, period, you're using their node. They are your bank. You control the money in there, so they don't get to spend your money without your consent. But they are your bank. They can change the rules. You're trusting that their node is reflecting accurate information.
Thus, like, would that, you can just say no and shut me down, but would it be like a Celsius situation? Like you gave them your money and so then they changed the rules and were like, nope, you don't have any more money, sorry.
No, Celsius is much worse. Celsius, you gave up your keys.
Okay.
So... Like,
are there any wallets that failed that then are like no longer? Or like
not if it was a non-custodial wallet. So yeah, if you use a Coinbase wallet, if you're using Cash App, right? Because Cash App is custodial. Or if you're using Strike, which is also custodial, right? Or if you're using definitely Robinhood, a Coinbase, any of these are custodial. When they have your Bitcoin, they hold your keys. If they disappear, so does your Bitcoin.
Right.
Or whatever crypto you got in them. Versus, I'll use Coinbase as an example. So that's Coinbase proper if you're using the exchange. Coinbase has a self-custodial wallet, right? Especially for like ETH type stuff. You could use the Coinbase self-custodial wallet. You control the keys. You're still trusting their node with the information if you're not running your own node. But if Coinbase goes out of business and the wallet evaporates, you got your seed phrase, you have your private key. You can just take your private key and go to a different wallet or your own node, put it in, and boom. Right? Okay.
I just wrote down node equals bank.
Your node is your bank.
Your bank.
Be your own bank means run your own node.
Okay. All right. And then I have more questions, but I think we're...
Yep. So we're getting up there, but this is why we do the block notes, because every time we have a conversation, especially like this, even when the show runs long and then we end up talking longer, right? So if you want to be part of that conversation, you can check us out on YouTube for the block notes for this episode. It comes out a couple days after our primary episode. So depending on when you're listening to it, you'll hear the after conversation. If you're listening to us live right now, that'll be on in about 3 days, Tuesday or Wednesday. You'll be able to catch the block notes. If you're listening to us after that, then it's available now.
Yeah.
So go check that out on YouTube. Just go binge. Netflix this.
Yeah.
You can chill if you want to.
Yeah.
But Netflix it at least. Where else can they catch us?
Facebook, TikTok, and X or Twitter. And those are all at The Blockument. We are also at theblockument.com. And at theblockument.com, you can find resources that's connected to today's topic. You can find out where you can listen to us on like Apple or Android, Spotify, etc.
Etc.
Yep, you can find out. You can find our past episodes. You can find out what we're going to talk about next. All kinds of beautiful, beautiful information.
All kinds of stuff. And if you got some comments, questions, insights, conflicts with what we're talking about today, please let us know.
Yeah.
And hit us up on one of these channels and let's talk.
Let's talk about it.
That's right. And until then, you come for the riches.
Stay for the revolution.
Peace.
Peace.